Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crisis to Continuity, Navigating the Anthology Bankruptcy and Building Data Resilience. I'm Michelle Clifton. I'm going to be your host for today's conversation. So thank you for joining our rapid response and strategic series for higher education leaders. Today's session, Crisis to Continuity, addresses the urgent and non-theoretical challenge of Anthology's Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. And more importantly, with what your institution can do right now to protect against operations, secure data, and ensure continuity. This is about maintaining control during disruption. Today, I'm joined by higher education experts, Dr. Michelle Spangler, CEO of Syscorp, and Josh Dietrich, Vice President of Coaching Services at Doctums Global. These experts will draw upon their almost 60 years of combined experience to advise you on how to emerge from this shakeup and be more autonomous and successful. Now, throughout this thought-provoking conversation, you're going to have questions that we're going to follow up on at the end. So if you look at your screen and look at the lower 1/3 of the screen, there should be a Q&A box. At any point in time, click on that box and write in your question, and then our moderator will read those out to us at the end. All right, so let's get started. We will engage in a live discussion covering these topics. External uncertainty. So understanding the implications of the Chapter 11 filing, what kind of market shifts we may experience, and other potential acquisitions. Institutional impact, how these changes affect your finances, enrollment pipelines, and operational stability. So very important. And we're going to do an interactive Q&A at the end to discuss these time-sensitive actions that we need to take, and we'll address your questions specifically. So key takeaways we hope that you have today: immediate action steps. We're not going to discuss a bunch of fluff and go through a lot of PowerPoint slides, just a few, but these immediate action steps are what you can do now to stabilize your operations and secure your critical data. And having been an administrator on college campuses, data is the heartbeat of the institution, and we want to protect it. Next, we want you to have market awareness, insights into how Anthology's product splits. Blackboard and then Ellucian and Encoura are the stalking horse bidders. So this may impact your technology ecosystem, and we'll go into more detail about that. And then third, strategic planning. What proactive approaches can you take to maintain autonomy and thrive beyond the current disruptions? The crisis we're seeing is not due to failure in educational technology itself, but into the financial model built by debt-fueled growth and aggressive acquisitions. I just got back from EDUCAUSE, and this was the buzz in conversations, keeping your eyes open and on the software companies that are aggressively acquiring other organizations. So we want to talk about Anthology's bankruptcy filing and how it is a direct result of the failure of a highly aggressive buy and build consolidation model implemented by Veritas Capital. Here are the key facts. Now, I would encourage you to definitely go to your vendor's website to get daily up-to-date information. And we pulled these facts from a Bloomberg article cited here at the bottom of the slide. First, we have the financial crisis. The company faced an acute liquidity crisis as its massive $1.8 billion variable rate debt resulted in an estimated $144 million in annual interest expense. That's the interest payment, which completely overwhelmed a reported $4 million in operational EBITDA. The purpose of the filing, and this is what's really important, we're not dissolving the company. The purpose of the filing is a structured reorganization designed to execute a prearranged breakup of this highly leveraged entity. It is not a liquidation. So what is the market impact? This move, highly indicative of market consolidation, which we've seen and should raise questions. This allows primary competitors to absorb Anthology's user base and their contracts. So what should our concerns be? And these concerns, honestly, would be the questions I would be asking your current and new vendors. So I'd give you advice to immediately join the communities, social networks, or even the users groups of your new owners so you can raise these questions. You're a user, be a loud voice. This change in ownership impacts the roadmap. So transitioning to new vendors like Ellucian and Encoura, who are the stalking horse bidders, this is for the divested units. You should raise questions about future pricing, service level agreements, integration with existing campus systems, and long-term product roadmaps. Managing codependencies. Customers should and must manage a future where your previously integrated platforms are now being retained by Blackboard, and divested systems could now go up to 3 or 4 separate owners and potentially competing companies. So when you have competing companies, now you're getting into market strategy, sales, and roadmap priorities for all of their other solutions. And then third, which is most important, and we're really going to dive deep in today, is the data export assurance. Institutions require confirmation that core data export capabilities, including course, assessments, gradebook, and analytics, remain fully available and unchanged throughout the sale and transition process. So we're going to give you advice to look to not just today for those concerns, but for other challenges we can't predict. We had COVID. We have vendor bankruptcy. What's the next one? What we're going to learn on the call today impacts you for not just this crisis, but other crises coming up. So this moment calls for strategic calm. Institutions that emerge the strongest from market disruptions aren't the ones that change the platforms the fastest. They're the ones that plan deliberately. They protect their data and they align technology decisions with their mission. I still can quote the mission of the first institution I worked for because we made every decision based on how we were going to serve and raise the educational level of our service area to that of the national average. So it's still embedded in who I am and what I focus my efforts on. And that should be what happens at your institution today. So next, we want to make informed decisions for today's challenge so that we strategically can make data-informed decisions because these timelines are colliding. All right, now our work at The Groove with higher education clients, we have seen 3 common responses to crisis like this. Now, this is very important. Lean in because we're getting into the good stuff. First, institutions freeze. What happens? They're just waiting for more information, waiting to see what somebody else does, not assessing or strategizing, just frozen. Next, others overreact. Let's quickly make changes. Making a vendor or system decision before facts are clear can be dangerous. But third, and the group that is the most successful, is to act with measured urgency. I want to say that again. Let's act with measured urgency, stabilizing immediate risk while preparing strategically for what comes next. So the last group is who this framework is built for. This is our executive response framework, and it focuses on 3 key actions every institution should take right now: stabilize, assess, and strategize. Stabilize, assess, and strategize, because this model helps you with both timelines, protecting your data and operations today while positioning your institution for long-term resilience and modernization. So today I'm joined by our higher education experts, Dr. Michelle Spangler, CEO of Syscorp, and Josh Dietrich, Vice President of Coaching Services from Doctums. Now I'm going to ask both speakers to introduce themselves. Josh, it looks like your slide is up. Will both of you go ahead and come off mute and introduce yourself? Josh, you go first, and then Michelle, will you jump in?
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Josh Dietrich. I am an executive coach working with higher education leaders to accelerate their growth. Prior to coaching, I spent 3 decades working for Ellucian, leading both product development and product management teams primarily leading the development and product strategy for platforms such as Colleague and Banner. So today I'm an executive coach with a background in neuroscience and ontological coaching, and I serve as the Vice President of Coaching Services for Doctums, and also lead my own practice when I'm coaching leaders outside of the higher education space.
Thank you, Josh.
And hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Michelle Spangler. I have over 28 years experience in higher education. I've specialized in ERP implementations, institutional research, compliance, as well as data structures. Prior to founding Syscorp, I served in multiple roles in various companies, including Workday, RSmart, and SIG, as well as institutional roles, both as an associate registrar and the Vice President of Institutional Research and Assessment. And through these various roles at these companies, I've worked across multiple student information systems, both nationwide and worldwide. And I'm just pleased to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much. And we're honored to have both of you. When we were putting together this series on this topic, I really looked for speakers that had deep experience in campus and data and mission to give advice to help the leaders. As you know, right at the end of this conversation, they're going to give you pearls of wisdom that you'll be able to take right to your campus. So let's get started. Dr. Spangler, let's begin with you. Let's talk about stabilize. If this were on your campus, and you've worked on campuses, if this were your campus, what would be your immediate first steps?
Absolutely. So there are 3 different points of view that I would use to drive how I'm going to react to this situation for my institution. There's functional point of view, which are all about those items that have a bit impact on the business and the compliance needs of the institution. Technical, so this is going to be through the viewpoint of with data security, access, and system degradation. And then really the third viewpoint is the ability of my staff to maintain any aspect of the system that could negatively be impacted by the action that we've just heard. Now, this is going to determine both my short-term and my long-term strategies for responding. So let's go into knowing my different viewpoints. I'm going to react in the first 30 to 60 days. And I'm going to start with the functional impact. And I'm going to immediately work to determine the vendor's intent on continue supporting mandate compliance updates in all the modules within the ERP. So this is compliance updates around HR, finance, and student. And the reason why this is so important is if you find that the yearly mandated compliance updates are no longer supported by the vendor, then this is going to drive some urgency around getting something in place quickly to address this critical need. Now, once I have this information, I'm going to turn my attention to the technical impact. And this is related to the data security, or what are their plans to stay ahead of any risk items that would impact breaching or hacking. What systems or modules they're going to start removing, possibly to make the sale of their system more appealing. This is going to drive what types of data I need to begin analyzing and backing up to export into a warehouse for future needs. Now, finally, I would review my staff and what's their skill set, and review what training they might need to either address the systems or the compliance items that are no longer going to be supported. And what's my staff's ability to move the data into a vendor neutral platform for later use? Really, and this is about to help me and my institution avoid vendor lock-in. Now, these actions, they're going to address these key drivers of data security, access, and service contingency. And then based on my findings, I can then calculate and plan what my next set of actions are and stabilize my team really before we begin sharing any news of how we're going to react, so that we can include not only the information that we just heard, but our plan to address it accordingly.
Oh, that's good. That's wonderful. This will be recorded. So for those of you taking notes, definitely download it because I think your office is most interested in compliance, your registrar, financial aid, CFO, HR. When those regular cadence of compliance reports, they're critical. You can't just, I can't get to it because my vendor says no. Really need to be on top of that. That's great advice, Michelle. So that helps us stabilize. Also, data security. And I like the term that you used, vendor lock-in. You know, looking at your data. So this goes back to that. What can we do to modernize outside of where our vendors are, but we can be more resilient down the road? And that's one of them. Josh, so from your perspective, guiding organizational change and your background is perfect for this, but what should leaders of the organization be doing assessing this situation?
Well, I think it's really important. I love to say what I've heard another coach, Scott Evelyn, says in one of his books: leaders control the weather. And so as you're in this stabilized space, it's really important to think about how you're showing up and understanding how that affects your team and the people around you. If you go into a team meeting and the leader is stressed out and frazzled, the rest of the team naturally begins to feel the same way. But if the leader is calm and collected and confident, it causes the same for the team. And there's neuroscience behind that. We have neurons called mirror neurons that when we look at someone else and we see a particular emotion in them, our mirror neurons fire and cause the same emotions to show up within us, which is why when someone shows up in a calming way, we naturally feel more calm as well. So it's really important to think about that as you go through this. And if you think about just going from crisis to continuity, if you show up viewing this as a crisis, you're going to project the energy of a crisis. If you think towards moving to continuity and stability, you're going to project that energy. And the metaphor I really like to use with leaders as we're building these muscles is to think about being on stage and being backstage. It's important for us to be backstage and have that opportunity. You've got a trusted colleague or partner or friend or a coach where it's a safe space to be completely open and transparent and not have to choose your words carefully and really just let it all out. Right? And it's important as a leader to give that space to your team. So if they're dealing with the stress of all of this, they have a safe space to do that. But it's also important to recognize when you leave that space and you go on stage, like I'm on stage right now, right? And you're on stage as you meet with your team or you meet with the cabinet of the institution or you meet with a partner. There's a different energy you need to bring and you need to show up in a different way. And Michelle, you remember when we worked together at DataTel, we had those DataTel basics cards. One of the things that we did really well is there were 20 DataTel basics that they wanted all of us to embody every single day. And the one that sticks with me the most was the basic that said, always act to increase the employee's confidence in DataTel. And I have kept that advice, taken it to heart, whether I'm an employee of an organization, whether I'm meeting with colleagues or people outside of an organization. When I'm on stage, I think about how I'm showing up, the energy I'm projecting, the words I'm using. And this isn't about having like toxic positivity or showing up in an inauthentic way, but we can be very thoughtful about how we choose to show up so that we are projecting an energy to our teams and to our colleagues that instills confidence in ourselves and our organization.
That's wonderful. And for those of you on this call, I worked with Josh 20 years ago, and he embodied everything that he's saying now. And so it should be no surprise that when this situation arose, I thought, who will provide strategic calm at this moment? Josh came to mind. And so I think of these moments where change management is not an activity we experience when you're implementing new software. Because we're in the world of technology and meeting student needs, every day is a day of human-centric change management. And right now, we're calling upon what can we do with our teams and our staff to then meet the needs of the student. But I love those analogies and examples. I hope everyone models that with their team as you put together your assessment for what's going on in your campus. Right now, let's strategize. So Dr. Spangler, how do we strategize at our institution for that longer term? You know, what you talked about was that immediate to stabilize, we've assessed. How do we strategize for this and other crises that we will encounter?
Absolutely. So it's like you said, once I have an idea around what my institution's immediate needs are versus what my institution's long-term strategy is, I can begin to really evaluate what my choices are. This is where I take a look at what kind of runway do I have, and I can compare all of the information that I've gained to really determine how this might impact the long-term strategy of my institution. What are my vision? What are my goals? So, for example, does the 5-year strategy or vision of my institution include some of the major key drivers right now, which is big data analytics and AI? So, if that is a major component of my institution's strategic plan and vision, the cloud, or specifically a SaaS solution, might be something I want to consider. But I would want to take the time to evaluate what my current IT structure is, my system quality that I'm going to have as a result of the announcement, but more importantly, the system quality I want for future use and the information quality that I will be pulling from the system and the compatibility that's really required with my auxiliary systems so that I can continue to do what is the most important thing, which is support my campus so they can continue with business as usual. And so, really, it's all about just understanding these critical success factors that will allow me to create a strategic goal and a strategic plan on how to move forward from both the knowledge that I gained from the stabilization, but as well as any kind of assessment activities that I had completed.
Would you also say, like, when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking about and putting myself on a campus that's experiencing this shift. I should have that strategic plan and then see where it overlays with the anthology strategy, who buys those, because the roadmaps may change. I shouldn't write my strategic plan based off of whom ends up buying these solutions. What is the
That's correct.
strategy for your? I just caught that, and I know we've had this conversation, but your strategy should drive where you want to be, the institution 10 years from now, not a crisis that we're living in this moment. This is
Absolutely.
that modernization moment.
Absolutely.
I hear you. Okay, wonderful. Well, Josh, I know that you've gone through lots of different, let's call them modernization or campus-wide change moments, because we did some of those together at DataTel, but you're no stranger to leading change and big campus-wide initiatives. So what lessons have you learned that you could share with our audience today to get through this smoothly, and maybe some good and bad of this level of change?
I mean, I think the most significant initiative I led was when we moved the colleague base from release 17 to release 18, and we moved
Oh, I
85% of our clients in less than a year. And when I took over ownership of that initiative, one thing I learned was there was a lot of misinformation out there because we didn't have good open communication channels. And I also learned that there's a whole lot that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I really need to go out and connect with people across the organization and connect with clients to get better information about what was going on. And I've seen other leaders follow this same playbook and practice with any kind of significant initiative. And so when I think particularly to an IT leader who might be leading a campus-wide change like this, the first thing I would encourage them to do is to think through all of the key relationships, right? We tend to think about our team, and we've been taking care of our team. And whenever I do 360s, I often see very high scores from the team, but it's the peers and it's the managing up where we often don't spend as much energy. And people often with an IT background grew up in an environment where they were executors. Someone else said, here's the strategy, and then they were great at planning and executing and delivering. And now is an opportunity to strengthen your muscle around building relationships on campus. So what I encourage people to do is go on a listening tour. Think through the key stakeholders across campus who are going to be impacted by this change, who might not have up-to-date information or who might have questions, and spend time connecting with each one of them and primarily listening to what their concerns are, what their ideas are, what they want to communicate back to you, and use that to contribute to assessing the situation and figuring out how you plan to go forward. It's also a great opportunity to dispel misinformation as you come across it as you go through. We think about CIOs as the chief information officer, but if you're leading an initiative like this, you're also the chief informing officer. Like when we moved everyone from R17 to R18, I built every 2 weeks, everybody got an update from me on where we are, the key metrics. Here's where clients are in the funnel and moving through this process. Here's the key things that we're doing to help move people forward. And that was a key part of what I did. And I think the last thing I would just share on this is you think about that, particularly if you're saying, I feel overwhelmed, I'm not great at relationship management, and that's just going to push me over the edge. Realize that you likely have very strong project management execution talents within your team. So this is a great opportunity for you to delegate more. Pass some of that on to someone else on your team who you can coach and mentor so that you free yourself up to really strengthen your relationship muscles and to spend more time engaging across campus to make sure everybody is on board with this change.
That's really good. And you said something that I just jumped in on. In the absence of information, that void, I'll create my own, and it's not going to be accurate. So definitely that cadence that you had did keep us informed of what was going on, and that's why we were able to move so quickly and think of that service level, customer service we wanted to give employees, students, alumni, that sort of a thing. Could you give us just some, and I know we're nearing the end of our time, but some quick pointers on how department leaders like deans, directors, or whatever can interact with their teams? What's a little bit of advice on how they can interact with them best?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things I'll say sort of briefly. One is be aware of the growth mindset, right? A lot of people on teams, particularly if they've been working with a particular platform for a long time and there's change coming, that can be intimidating, and people might feel like, this is really what I know. I don't know that I can learn anything else. And like I would say, even when I was early in my leadership career, I would say, I'm not strategic. Other people figure out the strategy, I'll go execute. When we embody a growth mindset, we switch from a fixed mindset that says, this is how I'm built, this is how nature wired me, and I can't do anything else, to a growth mindset that recognizes we're always capable of learning and growing. And the simple way we do that is by throwing the word yet onto the end of the sentence. So instead of saying, I'm not strategic, I say, I'm not strategic yet. And that one magic word helps to turn us towards, oh, there's space for me to learn and grow. Of course, I can build my strategic thinking muscles and get better. When you think about your employees, recognize that they may be in their comfort zone. And I always like to think of 3 concentric circles. We've got our comfort zone, our learning zone, and our danger zone. When we're in our comfort zone, we actually don't have enough stimulation to feel challenged. And our prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of executive function, does not operate at peak efficiency. So we want to push out of that into this learning zone where we're learning new things, we're actively engaged. That gets us where our prefrontal cortex is now operating at its most effective state. But if we push people too far and they become overwhelmed and stressed out, there's too much stress and stimulation. That pushes us into the danger zone where, again, the PFC starts to go offline again. So look at your employees and make sure you're engaging them in a way that is always pushing them out of the comfort zone, but checking and course correcting with them so you're not pushing them so much that they're into this danger zone. And the last thought I would just offer, particularly if you're moving to a new platform, a best practice I've seen many institutions do is they'll bring in outside resources, consultants to support the existing platform so that their employees don't spend their time continuing to support a platform when they're putting something new in place, and instead can spend the lion's share of their time and energy learning that new platform, making the decisions to put that in the most effective way, and really focusing their time there.
Absolutely. Well, great sage advice. Can both of you just very quickly say, if you had a thought to leave everyone with, what would be your final advice for our listeners today on what to do during this crisis? Dr. Spangler, how about you jump in first, and then Josh, you can follow up after.
Sure. So honestly, it really begins with seeking to understand first and then react. You need to evaluate the impact of the change, the ability to support your institution, and then ultimately determine what changes and their coinciding timelines are going to be beneficial in achieving the long-term vision and strategic plan of the institution, because ultimately that's our goal. And while this announcement could be looked at really two different ways. And so instead of seeing this announcement as an exercise of really reacting to the crisis, maybe we can switch it, and it's an opportunity to really see progress in your institution's overall strategic plan and how you react to the announcement.
Wonderful. Thank you. Josh?
I don't remember the exact words you used at the beginning, but I think it was something like managed urgency. I think that's a great way to show up. You want to project a sense of urgency while at the same time being thoughtful and reflective about it and in a confident way. So think through how you're showing up with your team and your institution to bring confidence. Go on that listening tour to connect with other leaders and really recognize that this is a huge opportunity for you and your team to learn and grow as you work through this process. I grew more during that R17 to R18 migration than at any other point in my lifetime, probably.
Wonderful. And does any of this align with where you want your institution to be in 10 years? So this might be just that push, that tipping point to get you to look through another lens. That's wonderful. All right, before we jump into those questions, I just wanted to thank you all so much for sharing your time. For those of you on this call, we have 2 more webinars that go deep into this conversation. We ask you to sign up for those because they're, one is risk to resilience. It's building a stable foundation amid platform change. So that's going to look heavy at data and protecting your data, and then delivery excellence. We want to make sure to future-proof our service during system transition. So we encourage you to sign up for these. And then I just wanted to sincerely thank you for taking your time. I know a lot of higher education leaders, and myself included, we would take our lunch hour to listen to webinars to get those new ideas. So thank you for having probably lunch at your desk and spending your time, and feel free to forward this webinar to anyone else who may need it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let's jump over to see what your questions are. Right.